They told me I was worth $3,000. I remember thinking that seemed low. Not because I had any illusions about my value as a human being, understand, but because the girl before me, the one with the copper hair who wouldn't stop crying, went for $4,500. I kept my face blank when they announced my price, kept my hands steady even though every instinct screamed to run, to fight, to do something other than stand there like cattle at auction. But I'd learned young that survival meant swallowing your pride, your anger, your fear, and I was very good at surviving. The woman who bought me didn't look like the others. She sat in the back of the warehouse, half hidden in shadows that the flickering overhead lights couldn't quite penetrate. While the men around her leaned forward with wet lips and hungry eyes, she remained perfectly still. I couldn't see her face clearly, just the sharp line of her jaw and the way her fingers drummed once, twice, 3 times against the armrest of her chair before she raised 2 fingers. The auctioneer's voice cracked with something that might have been fear when he called out her bid. 4,000. No one countered. The silence that followed felt like drowning. I watched those men, the ones who'd been so eager moments before, suddenly find their shoes fascinating. One actually stood up and left. Just walked out like the building was on fire. And this woman, this stranger who'd just purchased me like I was a lamp at a yard sale, she stood slowly, and I finally saw her. She was beautiful in the way a knife is beautiful. All clean lines and dangerous edges. Her hair was black, cut short on one side and longer on the other, falling across her face in a way that seemed deliberately careless. She wore a suit, charcoal gray, tailored so perfectly it probably cost more than my entire life up to that point. But it was her eyes that made my stomach drop. Dark, almost black in the dim light, and completely empty of emotion. She looked at me the way you'd look at a problem you were trying to solve. Then she turned and walked out, and the men in cheap cologne and cheaper suits grabbed my arms and dragged me after her. The drive to her house took 43 minutes. I counted every single one, watching the city lights blur past the tinted windows of her car. She sat across from me in the back seat, silent, scrolling through her phone with the kind of casual indifference that made my skin crawl. The driver never looked back, never acknowledged I existed. Classical music played softly through the speakers, something with violins that sounded like sadness wrapped in silk. I wanted to ask where we were going, what she wanted from me, if it would hurt. I didn't ask any of it. The house wasn't what I expected. Somehow I'd imagined something gothic, all dark wood and darker secrets. Instead, we pulled up to a modern building, all glass and steel and clean lines that reflected the moon. Beautiful. Cold. The kind of place that appeared in architecture magazines with captions about innovative design and sustainable materials. She got out without a word, and I followed because what else could I do? Inside, everything was white. White walls, white furniture, white marble floors that clicked under my worn shoes. The only color came from a massive painting on the far wall, an abstract thing in reds and blacks that looked like violence frozen in time. She walked past it without a glance, her heels making sharp sounds that echoed through the space. A woman appeared from somewhere, older, with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. She looked at me with something that might have been pity, then at the woman who'd bought me with something that definitely was fear. 6th floor, East Wing, the woman who owned me now said. Her voice was lower than I expected, rough around the edges like she'd spent years smoking cigarettes or screaming. Maybe both. Show her the room. Get her whatever she needs. Then she was gone, disappearing up a floating staircase that seemed to hang in midair, and I was left standing there with my $3,000 price tag and no idea what came next. The older woman, who introduced herself as Vekra, led me to an elevator. We rode up in silence, and I caught my reflection in the mirrored walls. I looked exactly like what I was. Thin, too thin, with dark circles under my eyes and hair that hadn't seen a proper salon in years. The dress they'd put me in for the auction was cheap satin, red, riding up my thighs in a way that made my skin crawl. I pulled it down. It slid back up. Vekra pretended not to notice. The room she showed me to made me want to cry. It had windows. Huge floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the city, and I could see lights, thousands of them, stretching to the horizon. There was a bed, bigger than any bed I'd ever seen, with white sheets that looked soft enough to drown in. A bathroom attached, all marble and gold fixtures. Towels that were actually fluffy. And on a chair by the window, someone had laid out clothes. Real clothes. Jeans, a sweater, things that covered you instead of displaying you. "You can shower," Vekra said quietly. "There's food in the kitchen if you're hungry. Down the elevator, main floor, to the left. Help yourself to anything." I stared at her. This felt like a trick. It had to be a trick. "She doesn't." Vekra hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "She won't bother you tonight. You're safe to sleep." Then she left, and I was alone in this beautiful room with its beautiful view, and I couldn't figure out what game we were playing. I didn't shower. Didn't change. Didn't eat. I sat on the floor by the door, my back against the wall, and I waited for whatever came next. Because it always came. The kindness was always just the setup for the cruelty. I'd learned that the hard way, in basements and backrooms and places I tried very hard not to remember. So I waited. The sun came up slowly, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that hurt to look at. I'd been awake all night, my body too wired on adrenaline and fear to even consider sleep. When footsteps sounded in the hallway, I tensed, but they walked past my door without slowing. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher. My stomach growled, a hollow ache I'd gotten good at ignoring, but the thought of leaving this room, of wandering through this stranger's house looking for food, felt dangerous in ways I couldn't articulate. Around noon, Vekra knocked softly. When I didn't answer, she opened the door anyway, found me still sitting on the floor, still in that ridiculous red dress. Her expression did something complicated. "Child," she said, and the kindness in her voice made my throat tight. "You need to eat." She brought me food. Not leftovers or scraps, but a plate with eggs and toast and fruit that looked almost too pretty to eat. She set it down beside me, didn't try to force me to the table or comment on my position by the door. "She's working," Vekra said, answering a question I hadn't asked. "She works most days. Won't be back until evening, probably late." I looked at the food. At Vekra. At the door. What does she want from me? Vekra's face went carefully blank. That's a question for her, not me. She left, and I ate because starving yourself is just another way of dying, and I wasn't ready for that yet. The eggs were perfect. Fluffy. Seasoned with something that tasted like hope, which was ridiculous because eggs can't taste like emotions, but there it was anyway. The second day was worse than the first. Not because anything happened, but because nothing did. I woke up on the floor again, my neck screaming from the angle I'd slept at, and the house was silent. Empty. Vekra brought breakfast. I ate it. She brought lunch. I ate that too. The woman who owned me, whose name I still didn't know, never appeared. By the third day, I was starting to lose my mind. I'd been in bad situations before. I knew bad situations. There were patterns to them, rhythms you could predict. The calm before the storm, sure, but this wasn't calm. This was nothing. This was being suspended in amber, waiting for a blow that never fell. I started exploring, carefully at first, then with more boldness when nothing stopped me. The house was enormous, all those white walls and open spaces, art that probably cost more than most people made in a year. There was a library with books in languages I couldn't read. A gym with equipment that looked like modern torture devices. A kitchen that could have served a restaurant, all stainless steel and expensive appliances. And everywhere, that same eerie quiet. On the fourth day, I saw her. She came home while I was in the kitchen, raiding the refrigerator for the third time because Vekra had the day off and I'd finally accepted that no one was going to punish me for feeding myself. I heard the front door open, heard those sharp footsteps on the marble, and I froze with a container of leftover pasta halfway to my mouth. She appeared in the doorway, still in that perfect suit, though this one was navy instead of gray. There was blood on her collar. Just a small spot, barely noticeable, but my eyes went right to it. We stared at each other. "You should heat that up," she said finally, nodding at the pasta. "It's better warm." Then she walked past me, up the stairs, and I didn't see her again for 2 days. I started to understand that I was living with a ghost. She existed in the spaces between moments, in the sounds of doors closing in distant parts of the house, in the coffee cup left in the sink that hadn't been there an hour before. Sometimes I'd catch her scent, something dark and expensive, and know she'd just been in a room I was about to enter. But we didn't speak, didn't interact. I was a piece of furniture she'd purchased and forgotten about. By the 6th day, I was angry. Not the hot, explosive kind of anger that gets you killed. The cold, calculating kind that had kept me alive this long. Because I'd figured it out, or thought I had. This was some kind of power play. Some rich person's game where they bought people and ignored them just to prove they could. Maybe she'd get bored eventually, remember I existed, and then whatever she'd actually bought me for would begin. The not knowing was worse than knowing ever could be. On the 7th day, I broke. She came home earlier than usual, around 7 in the evening, and I heard her in her office, a room I'd peeked into but never entered. Before I could talk myself out of it, before survival instinct could override desperation, I walked to that door and knocked. Silence. Then, come in. The office was different from the rest of the house. Where everything else was white and minimal, this room was warm. Dark wood shelves lined with books, a desk that looked antique, leather chairs that had been worn soft with use. She sat behind the desk, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, and I could see tattoos covering her forearms. Intricate designs that looked like they told stories I'd need years to decode. She looked tired. Actually tired, not just the cosmetic kind, and there were lines around her eyes I hadn't noticed before. Is something wrong? She asked, and she sounded genuinely concerned, which made me even angrier. Why did you buy me? The question came out harder than I'd intended, sharp enough that she blinked. Excuse me? It's been a week. I stepped into the room, my hands shaking so I shoved them in the pockets of the jeans she'd provided. A week, and you haven't done anything. Haven't touched me, haven't made demands, haven't even really looked at me. So what's the game? What are you waiting for? She leaned back in her chair, studying me with those dark eyes that gave nothing away. There's no game. Bullshit. The word felt good coming out, reckless and dangerous. People don't spend $4,000 on nothing. So either tell me what you want from me, or send me back, because this waiting is worse than anything else could be. Something flickered across her face. Pain, maybe. Or recognition. You think I'm going to send you back? I think I don't know what you're going to do, and that's terrifying. My voice cracked. I hated that it cracked. At least with the others, I knew. It was horrible, but I knew. I can't do this. The not knowing. So please, just tell me. What did you buy me for? She was quiet for a long time, long enough that I almost turned and ran. Then she stood, walked around the desk, and for one horrible moment I thought she was going to touch me. Instead, she leaned against the desk, arms crossed, and looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time. What's your name? I hadn't expected that. Sayer. Sayer, she repeated, tasting it. I'm Theron. The name fit her. Sharp. Unusual. Vaguely threatening. I bought you, Sayer, because I'm going to destroy them. I must have looked confused because she continued, her voice taking on an edge that could cut glass. The people who sold you. The entire operation. Everyone involved. I'm going to burn it all to the ground and salt the earth where it stood. She paused. And I needed someone on the inside to do it. My brain tried to process this. Failed. Tried again. You bought me, to help you take down a human trafficking ring? Yes. Why? Her jaw tightened. Because I was you once. Because I know exactly what they do, what they take, what they leave behind when they're done. And because I can't let it continue. The world tilted sideways. I reached out, grabbed the back of a chair to steady myself. You were trafficked? 23 years ago. Sold to a man who, she stopped, swallowed hard. Who taught me that sometimes the only way to survive is to become something worse than the thing that's trying to destroy you. I wanted to ask more, wanted to dig into that story, but the way she'd closed off told me that door was locked tight. So you don't want me for sex? Labor? Entertainment? Her laugh was bitter. No, Sayer. I don't want you for anything except your freedom. And maybe your help, if you're willing to give it. I sat down hard in the chair I'd been gripping. My legs had stopped working properly. They'll kill you if you try to expose them. Kill both of us. They can try. There was something absolutely terrifying in her smile. But I've been killing people since I was 17 years old, and I'm very, very good at it. If you're watching this and your mind is absolutely spinning right now, smash that like button because trust me, you're going to want to remember where you paused this story. And drop a comment telling me if you saw this twist coming, because I definitely didn't. The implications of what she'd just said crashed over me in waves. She was trafficked. She killed someone. Probably the man who'd bought her, based on the way she'd stopped talking. And now she was rich enough to drop $4,000 without blinking, powerful enough to make grown men leave a room just by existing. What happened to him? I asked quietly. The man who bought you? I slit his throat while he slept. She said it like she was commenting on the weather. It was my first kill. Not my last. How many people I've killed? She considered. I stopped counting after 32. I should have been terrified. Should have run screaming from that room. Instead, I felt something warm unfurl in my chest. Something that might have been hope. Why do you need me? You clearly don't need help killing people. Because walking into that warehouse guns blazing would save maybe a dozen girls before they scattered like roaches. They'd rebuild somewhere else, with better security, harder to find. She moved back behind her desk, pulled out a file folder, slid it across to me. I need information. Locations. Names. Supply chains. I need to cut off every head of this hydra simultaneously, and to do that, I need someone who can move through their world without raising suspicion. I opened the folder. Inside were photographs. Documents. Spreadsheets with numbers that made my stomach turn. This wasn't some impulsive revenge fantasy. This was planned. Researched. She'd been working on this for months, maybe years. You think they'll trust me? I think you're smart enough to make them trust you. She leaned forward. I've been watching the operation for 18 months. I know how they work. They check in on their products, make sure the buyers are satisfied, look for opportunities to upsell. When they contact me, and they will, I'll tell them you're perfect. Exactly what I wanted. And I'll express interest in more. They'll want to see me. See that I'm being used properly. Then we'll give them a show. Her expression didn't change. Nothing that will hurt you. Nothing you don't agree to. But enough to satisfy their sick curiosity. I flipped through more pages, seeing names I recognized. Men who'd been at the auction. Men who'd bought other girls. One who'd bought the girl before me, the one with copper hair. What happened to her? I touched the photo. The girl who went for $4,500? Theron's face went very still. She killed herself 3 days after purchase. Jumped from her buyer's balcony. 17th floor. The folder fell from my hands. I was too slow. Theron's voice was barely a whisper. I'd been planning to buy her, but I hesitated because the price was climbing and I didn't want to draw attention by being too eager. By the time I adjusted my strategy, she was already gone. That's not your fault, isn't it? She looked at me, and for the first time I saw past the ice to the person underneath. I had the money. I had the power. I could have saved her and I didn't, because I was playing chess while she was dying. We sat in silence, the weight of that unnamed girl pressing down on both of us. If I help you, I said slowly, what happens after? When it's done, you're free. I'll give you money, enough to start fresh anywhere you want. Papers, if you need them. References. Education. Whatever you need to build a life that's actually yours. Just like that. Just like that. It sounded too good to be true, which meant it probably was. But what was my alternative? Go back to that warehouse? Wait for another buyer who might not have a revenge plot and a conscience. What if I say no? Then you're still free. I'll still give you the money and the fresh start. You don't owe me anything, Sayer. Not your help. Not your loyalty. Not your gratitude. She stood, moved to the window, looked out at the city lights. I bought you because the system forced me to play by its rules to beat it. But you're not property. You never were. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her so badly it hurt. How long will this take? The takedown. If we're thorough? 3 to 6 months. And in that time, I just live here? You live here. You eat. You sleep. You heal, if you can. She turned back to me. And when they come to check on you, you tell them exactly what they want to hear. I thought about that girl with the copper hair. About the dozens of others I'd seen cycle through. About the ones who came before and the ones who would come after if someone didn't stop it. Okay, I heard myself say. I'll help you. Theron's expression didn't change, but something in her posture relaxed slightly. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. I might be terrible at this. I doubt that. She pulled out another folder, thicker than the first. You survived long enough for me to buy you. That takes more intelligence and adaptability than most people have. The second folder was full of information about the trafficking operation. Organizational charts. Property records. Financial transactions. She'd been thorough, I'd give her that. When do we start? Tomorrow. Tonight you rest. Eat something. Take a shower in that bathroom you've been avoiding. The corner of her mouth twitched. Vekra told me you've been sleeping on the floor. Heat flooded my face. I didn't want to mess up the bed. It's your bed now, Sayer. Mess it up all you want. I gathered the folders, stood up, and made it to the door before turning back. Why did you hesitate? She looked up from her desk, confusion crossing her face. When you bought me. At the auction. You waited. Why? Theron was quiet for a long moment. Because the moment I bid, the moment I entered that world even as a buyer, I became complicit in it. Again. And that, she shook her head. That was harder than I expected. I understood that. The way survival forces you to compromise pieces of yourself until you look up one day and don't recognize what's left. For what it's worth, I said, I'm glad you did. Hesitate and then buy me anyway. So am I. I went back to my room, to the bed I'd been too afraid to sleep in, and for the first time in 7 days, I let myself hope that maybe, just maybe, I'd landed somewhere that wasn't another version of hell. The shower was everything I'd imagined and more. Hot water that didn't run out after 3 minutes. Soap that smelled like vanilla and something else I couldn't identify. Shampoo that actually made my hair feel soft instead of stripping it to straw. I stood under the spray until my skin pruned, washing away a week of fear and the lingering stink of that auction house. When I finally emerged, wrapped in a towel that was bigger than me, I found clothes laid out on the bed. Not the jeans from before, but soft things. Sweatpants. A t-shirt that was probably expensive but looked comfortable. Underwear, still in the package, that actually fit. I got dressed and caught sight of myself in the full-length mirror. I looked almost human. The girl staring back at me had clean hair, clear skin where the grime had washed off, and eyes that didn't look quite so haunted. I looked younger than my 20 years, but also older. Like I'd aged backward and forward simultaneously. There was a knock at the door. Vekra, with a tray. I thought you might be hungry. After your talk with Theron. She set the tray on the desk by the window. Soup, bread, tea that smelled like mint and comfort. Thank you, I said, meaning it. She told me, Vekra said quietly. About the plan. About what you agreed to do. Is that okay with you? Vekra smiled, sad and knowing. Child, I was wondering how long it would take her to tell you. She's been half crazy with this plan for months, ever since she found out about that warehouse. Were you trafficked? No, but my daughter was. Vekra's hands tightened on the tray. 15 years ago. I never found her. Never even knew if she survived. When Theron found me, homeless and looking for any news, any hint of what happened, she gave me a job, a purpose, and a promise that she'd never stop looking. My throat went tight. Did she find her? No. But we found her body. In a grave with 17 others, none older than 19. Vekra's voice didn't shake. She'd had years to build walls around this pain. Theron paid for proper burials. All of them. Made sure they had names on their headstones, even the ones we couldn't identify. I didn't know what to say to that. What words could possibly be enough? Eat, Vekra said, softer now. And sleep in the bed tonight. You're safe here, Sayer. I promise you that. After she left, I ate the soup, which was perfect, and drank the tea, which made my whole body relax in ways I'd forgotten were possible. Then I climbed into that enormous bed with its soft sheets and softer pillows, and I slept. No nightmares came. When I woke up, sun was streaming through the windows and someone had left breakfast on the desk. Fresh fruit, yogurt, granola, orange juice that tasted like it had come from actual oranges instead of a carton. There was also a note in handwriting I didn't recognize. There's a laptop in the desk drawer. Password is salt the earth. Start reading the files. I'll be home around 6. I found the laptop right where she said it would be, logged in with the password that was either incredibly melodramatic or incredibly appropriate, and started reading. The files were organized meticulously. Every piece of information cross-referenced, verified through multiple sources, dated and time-stamped. Theron might be a killer, but she was also apparently the most organized person I'd ever encountered. The trafficking ring was bigger than I'd imagined. Not just the warehouse where I'd been sold, but a whole network. Supply chains that stretched across 3 countries. Shell corporations. Money laundering operations. Politicians on the payroll. Police who looked the other way. And at the center of it all, a man named Kesh Varandal. His photo made my skin crawl. Late 50s, expensive suit, the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. According to Theron's notes, he'd been running this operation for over 20 years. Started small, selling girls out of the back of a nightclub, and built an empire on their suffering. The more I read, the angrier I got. Not the hot kind of anger from before, but something cold and purposeful. The kind of anger that could sustain you through months of dangerous work. I understood now why Theron wanted to salt the earth. These people didn't deserve prison. They deserved to be erased. Around noon, I heard the front door open. Footsteps, but not Theron's sharp heels. These were heavier. Male voices drifted up, speaking in a language I didn't understand. I froze, every instinct screaming danger. A knock at my door. Vekra's voice. Sayer? There are some men here to see you. From the auction house. My heart stopped. Theron isn't home, I managed to say. I know. But they're insisting. They say it's standard procedure. A wellness check on new purchases. This was it. The moment Theron had warned me about. I looked down at myself, at the comfortable clothes and clean hair, and knew I looked exactly like someone who wasn't being properly used. Give me 5 minutes, I called. I ran to the closet, found the red dress from the auction shoved in the back where I'd thrown it. Pulled it on with shaking hands. Messed up my hair. Pinched my cheeks until they were red, bit my lips until they swelled. In the bathroom, I found makeup, probably Vekra's, and applied it badly. Too much eyeliner. Lipstick slightly smeared. I looked at myself in the mirror. I looked like I'd been used hard and put away wet. Perfect. Deep breath. Another. Then I opened the door and walked downstairs. There were 3 of them in the foyer. 2 I recognized from the auction, muscle with dead eyes and cheaper suits. The 3rd was older, well-dressed, with the kind of face that was probably handsome before cruelty carved it into something else. There she is, he said, smiling. Sayer, isn't it? I nodded, kept my eyes down, played the part I'd learned to play in a dozen other situations. I'm Moravec. I work for the organization that facilitated your sale. We like to check in on our products, make sure everything is satisfactory. He walked around me in a slow circle. You look well. Thank you, sir. Where's your mistress? Working. She works most days. And what do you do while she's gone? This was the test. I could feel it. Whatever she tells me to do before she leaves. Cleaning. Cooking. Sometimes she leaves me tasks. I let my voice shake slightly. Sometimes she leaves me locked in my room. Moravec's smile widened. She's training you properly then. Good. Some buyers are too soft at first. Ruin the product with kindness before understanding that discipline is necessary. I wanted to kill him. The urge was so strong I could taste it. May I see your room? Terror, real terror now, because if he went up there he'd see the laptop, the files, all of Theron's research sitting open on the desk. It's messy, I stammered. She'll punish me if she knows I didn't clean it. I don't care about mess. I want to see how you're being kept. We were moving toward the stairs when the front door opened and Theron walked in. She took in the scene instantly. Me in the dress. The 3 men. Moravec's hand on my arm. Her face went absolutely empty. Gentlemen, she said, voice like ice. I wasn't expecting visitors. Standard wellness check, Miss Theron. Moravec released my arm but didn't back away. We like to ensure our clients are satisfied with their purchases. How thoughtful. Theron set down her briefcase, removed her jacket with careful precision. And are you satisfied with what you've found? Your girl is well presented, clearly being used appropriately. He gestured to me. Though I'd like to see her living quarters, if you don't mind. I mind very much, actually. Theron's smile was all teeth. My home is private. You've seen Sayre, confirmed she's alive and unblemished. Your job is done. The temperature in the room dropped about 20 degrees. We have the right to full inspection, Moravec said, but his voice had lost some of its confidence. You have the right to verify she exists and is in reasonable condition. Which you've done. Theron moved closer, and I watched the two muscle men shift uncomfortably. What you don't have the right to do is make demands in my home. So unless you'd like me to call Kesh and explain why you're harassing one of his best clients, I suggest you leave. Moravec's face went through several interesting colors. Of course. We meant no offense. I'm sure you didn't. Theron walked to the door, opened it. Gentlemen. They left, but Moravec paused at the threshold. We'll be in touch about future opportunities. I'm told you expressed interest in expanding your collection. Indeed. I'll await your call. The door closed behind them. Theron locked it. Then she turned to me, and her expression finally showed something. Concern. Are you all right? Did they touch you? I'm fine. He just grabbed my arm. I was shaking now that it was over, adrenaline crashing through my system. I didn't know what to tell them. I tried to look like you're being abused. I know. You did perfectly. She walked to the window, watched them drive away. Moravec is Kesh's second in command. The fact that he came personally means they're taking my interests seriously. He wanted to see my room. The laptop was open. All the files. Shit. Theron ran a hand through her hair. We'll need to be more careful. Keep everything locked when I'm not home. I nodded, then looked down at the dress I was wearing. I should change. Please do. Burn that thing if you want. I almost laughed. Almost. Back in my room, I changed into the sweats again, closed the laptop, hid it in the desk drawer. My hands were still shaking. The sound of Moravec's voice kept echoing in my head, that casual cruelty disguised as professionalism. There was a soft knock. Theron, with a glass of something amber. Whiskey, she said. You look like you could use it. I took it, sipped. It burned going down, but in a good way. You were incredible down there, Theron said. The way you looked, the way you acted. If I hadn't known better, I'd have believed you were exactly what they think you are. I've had practice. I know. She sat down on the edge of the bed, careful to leave space between us. And I'm sorry you had to do that. Sorry that even in trying to end this, I'm putting you in situations that require you to pretend to be a victim. It's not pretending if it's true. You're not a victim anymore, Sayre. You're a survivor. There's a difference. I wanted to believe that. Wanted it so badly. What happens now? Now we wait for Moravec to contact me. When he does, I'll express interest in another girl. Maybe two. We'll set up a private showing, and you'll help me gather information on their current inventory, where they're keeping them, security measures. And then we plan the extraction. Get the girls out, burn the warehouse, and start working our way up the chain. It sounded simple when she said it like that. It wouldn't be simple. I have a question, I said. About the man who bought you. The one you killed. Theron's expression closed off slightly, but she didn't shut me down. What about him? Do you regret it? Killing him. She was quiet for a long time, staring into her own glass of whiskey. I regret that I had to become a killer to survive. I regret that he made me into something I never wanted to be. She drained the glass. But do I regret that he's dead? No. Not even a little bit. The world is better without him in it. How old were you? 17. He'd had me for 8 months. Her jaw clenched. 8 months of teaching me that I was nothing. That I existed for his pleasure and his profit. He was planning to sell me to someone else, someone worse, when I decided I'd rather die than go through it again. But you didn't die. No. I killed him instead. Took his money, his car, his identity documents. Used it all to disappear. She looked at me then, really looked at me. I spent the next 6 years learning everything I could. How to fight. How to manipulate. How to move through the criminal world without drowning in it. And when I was ready, I started building something better. Something I could use to fight back. This? I gestured around at the house. This. The businesses. The connections. All of it. She stood, moved to the window. I'm not a good person, Sayer. I've done terrible things for what I told myself were good reasons. But this, taking down Kesh and everyone like him? This is the first purely good thing I've done in a long time. I joined her at the window, looking out at the city that held so much beauty and so much ugliness in the same space. I think you're better than you give yourself credit for. We'll see if you still think that when this is over. We stood there in silence, two survivors of the same horror, planning to burn it all down. And for the first time since I'd been sold, I felt something other than fear. I felt purpose. The next few weeks developed a rhythm. Theron would leave early, come home late, and in between we'd spend hours going over the files, planning scenarios, preparing for every possible contingency. She taught me things. How to read people. How to spot lies. How to use my appearance, my perceived weakness, as a weapon. They'll underestimate you, she said one afternoon while we were reviewing security footage from the warehouse. They see a young girl, a victim, and they assume stupidity. Use that. Let them think you're harmless. I was learning that Theron was one of the smartest people I'd ever met. She thought in layers, planned for scenarios I'd never even consider. Every detail mattered. Every variable accounted for. But it was the small moments between the planning that surprised me. Like when I found her in the kitchen at 2 a.m, teaching herself to make bread because she'd read somewhere that the process was meditative. Or the time I caught her watching a nature documentary about penguins, completely absorbed. Or the evening she came home with books, a whole bag of them, and awkwardly explained that she'd noticed I liked reading and thought I might enjoy these. She was trying to make this place feel less like a prison and more like a home. And slowly, carefully, I was starting to relax. Not completely. I still slept with my door locked. Still jumped at unexpected sounds. But the constant terror that had been my companion for years was starting to fade into something more manageable. I even started to laugh again. It happened accidentally, about 3 weeks in. Vekra had made dinner, something with chicken and vegetables that smelled incredible, and Theron had actually come home at a reasonable hour to eat with us. We were sitting at the dining table, this massive thing that could probably seat 20, and Theron was telling a story about a business meeting gone wrong. So there I am, she said, trying to explain why our third-quarter projections are down, and the CEO, this man who thinks he's God's gift to commerce, he's not paying attention. He's on his phone. Texting. During my presentation. What did you do? I asked. I stopped talking. Just stopped mid-sentence and stared at him. Waited. Her eyes gleamed with amusement. Took him a full minute to notice. When he finally looked up, I very calmly told him that if he checked his phone one more time, I'd buy his company and fire him just for the satisfaction. You didn't. I absolutely did. And you know what? He put the phone away. Did you actually buy his company? Not yet. But I'm considering it out of spite. I laughed. Actually laughed, this surprise sound that came from somewhere I'd forgotten existed. Theron looked startled, then pleased, and Vekra smiled into her wine like she'd just witnessed a miracle. And maybe she had. Maybe learning to laugh again when you'd forgotten how was its own kind of miracle. After that, things felt different. Easier. I started asking questions about things other than the plan. What did Theron do for actual work? How did she build her businesses? What was her favorite food? She answered everything with this careful patience, like she was afraid of scaring me off. Her legitimate businesses were mostly tech investments and real estate. The less legitimate ones were money laundering and information brokering, though she was careful to say that she only sold information that wouldn't get innocents hurt. Her favorite food was Thai curry, the kind that made your mouth burn. She'd never been in love. That last one surprised me. Never. I asked. We were in the library, supposedly reviewing maps of warehouse districts, but mostly just talking. Never, she confirmed. Hard to build trust when you've been bought and sold. Hard to let anyone close when you're afraid they'll see what you really are. What do you think you are? She looked at me, expression unreadable. Broken. Dangerous. Someone who's killed enough people that they've lost track of the number. I think you're someone who survived. Someone who's trying to make sure others survive too. That's generous. It's true. We looked at each other for a moment too long, and something passed between us that I couldn't quite name. Then Theron cleared her throat and went back to the maps, and the moment ended. But it had happened. And it kept happening. Little moments where our hands would brush reaching for the same document. Times when I'd catch her looking at me with an expression I couldn't read. Evenings where we'd talk until late about nothing important, just existing in each other's space. I told myself it didn't mean anything. She was giving me safety and I was grateful. That was all. But late at night, lying in that big bed, I'd think about the way she smiled when I made a joke. The way she listened when I talked like every word mattered. The way she'd killed someone at 17 to survive and had somehow built a life from those ashes. And I'd feel things I had no right to feel. She was 40. I was 20. She'd bought me. The power dynamic was all kinds of wrong. But my heart didn't seem to care about logic. 6 weeks after I'd arrived, Vekra called. Theron put him on speaker so I could hear. Miss Theron, I hope I'm not disturbing you. Not at all. I've been hoping to hear from you. Yes. You'd expressed interest in expanding your collection. We have a private showing scheduled for next week. Very exclusive. Only our most valued clients. What's the selection like? Varied. Ages 18 to 25. Different backgrounds, different specialties. I'm sure you'll find something to your taste. I felt sick listening to him talk about people like they were merchandise. Sounds promising. Can I bring Sayer? She could help me evaluate the options. A pause. That's highly irregular. Consider it part of her training. I'm teaching her to identify quality. Besides, seeing where she came from might help reinforce her place in my household. Another pause. I could practically hear Vek's brain working, weighing the unusual request against the money Theron represented. I'll need to confirm with Mr. Verandal. Of course. Let me know. After she hung up, Theron looked at me. You don't have to do this. If going back there is too much. I want to, I interrupted. Those girls in there, they need to see that someone who went through what they're going through survived. Even if I can't tell them that directly, maybe they'll see me and have hope. Sayer. Her voice was soft. You're remarkable. You know that? Heat flooded my face. I'm just trying to help. You're doing more than that. You're risking yourself for people you don't even know. So are you. I'm risking myself for revenge. There's a difference. Is there though? I met her eyes. Because it seems to me like you're risking everything to save people. That's not revenge. That's heroism. She looked away, uncomfortable with the praise. We should prepare. If Kesh approves this, we'll need you ready. The next few days were intensive. Theron taught me how to observe without seeming to. How to memorize faces and details. How to spot security cameras and guard positions. She bought me an outfit for the showing, something expensive and revealing that made me look like exactly what they'd expect. I hate this, I said, staring at myself in the mirror. I know. But it's armor. It makes you invisible because you're exactly what they expect to see. The night before the showing, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about going back to that warehouse, smelling the same smells, seeing the same desperation in new faces. Around midnight, I gave up and went downstairs. Found Theron in her office, still working. Can't sleep either, she asked. Too much thinking. She poured me a glass of whiskey, which had become our thing over the past weeks. We'd sit and drink and talk about nothing and everything. Tell me something true, I said, settling into the chair across from her desk. What kind of true? Any kind. Something you've never told anyone else. She considered this, swirling the whiskey in her glass. Sometimes I dream about the girl I was before I was sold. And in the dreams, I make different choices. I run away from home before they can take me. I fight back harder. I survive without becoming this. She gestured at herself, at the office, at the life she'd built. And when I wake up, I can't decide if that dream girl's life would have been better or worse than this. Would you give this up? If you could go back and change things? I'd give it up in a heartbeat if it meant those girls didn't have to suffer. But the reality is, I can't change the past. I can only try to make sure fewer people have that same future. I wanted to reach across the desk, take her hand, tell her that she was good and worthy and deserving of peace. But I didn't. Instead, I told her my own truth. I think I'm starting to forget what it felt like to be constantly afraid. Her expression softened. Is that good or bad? Good, I think. Scary, but good. I paused. You've given me that. This place, this safety. I don't know how to thank you for it. You don't need to thank me. You're helping me burn down an empire of suffering. I'd say we're even. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, drinking whiskey and existing in each other's space. Theron, I said eventually. Whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know that this time, these weeks here, they've meant something. You've meant something. She looked at me with those dark eyes that gave away nothing and everything at once. You've meant something too, Sayer. More than you know. And there it was again. That moment. That connection that felt like standing on the edge of something vast and terrifying and wonderful. Then her phone buzzed. Message from Moravec. Request approved. Showing is tomorrow at 8. Address to follow. Theron set the phone down. Last chance to back out. Not a chance. Then we should both get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be long. I stood, made it to the door, then turned back. Theron? That girl you dream about, the one who didn't have to become this? I bet she'd be proud of who you are now. Of what you're trying to do. I left before she could respond, but I heard her voice, quiet and rough with emotion. Thank you, Sayer. The next evening, standing in that same red dress in front of the mirror, I barely recognized myself. But this time I knew it was armor. This time I was choosing to wear it. This time I was going back to that warehouse not as a victim, but as someone who was going to burn it all down. And when Theron appeared in my doorway in another one of those perfect suits, looking like danger and determination wrapped in expensive fabric, I felt something click into place. We were doing this. Together. Ready? She asked. Ready. We drove through the city in silence, the classical music playing softly, but this time I wasn't counting minutes until some unknown horror. I was counting exits, security checkpoints, anything that might be useful later. The warehouse looked the same. Felt the same. That smell of desperation and cheap cologne. But I was different. Moravec greeted us at the door, all fake smiles and dead eyes. Ms. Theron. And young Sayer. So glad you could both make it. I kept my eyes down, played my part perfectly. The showing room was filled with them. Girls. Women. Some barely older than children. All standing in a line, all wearing that same look of resigned terror I remembered so well. And standing at the back of the room, watching everything with the cold calculation of a man who'd built an empire on suffering, was Kesh Varandal himself. This was it. We were in the monster's lair. If you've made it this far and your heart is absolutely pounding, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button because part 2 is going to be absolutely wild. And comment below telling me what you think happens next, because I guarantee you're not ready for what's coming. Theron's hand brushed mine, so briefly anyone watching would miss it. But I felt it. That tiny point of contact that said, I'm here. You're not alone. We've got this. Kesh Varandal smiled, and it was the smile of a man who'd never once doubted his power. He had no idea he was about to lose everything.